The call came on a Tuesday. I was standing in my corner office on the 42nd floor watching Seattle's rain streak down the glass like tears on a stranger's face. My phone buzzed against the mahogany desk, a number I didn't recognize from a place I'd spent a decade trying to forget. "Mr. Thorne," the voice was crisp, professional. "This is Dr. Whitmore from Ashford General Hospital. I'm calling about your father, Aldrich Thorne." My hand tightened around the phone. 10 years. 10 years of silence between us, and now this. What happened? He suffered a stroke. Minor, but at his age, he needs someone. The records list you as his only family. Only family. The words hung in the air like an accusation. I'd worked hard to become an island, to build a life where the past couldn't touch me. Thorne and Associates, my architectural firm, had just landed the Bellingham project, $40 million of glass and steel that would reshape the city's waterfront. I had meetings scheduled through next month. I had a life that didn't include him. "Mr. Thorne, are you still there?" "I'll be there tomorrow," I heard myself say. The words felt like someone else's, but even as I spoke them, I was already packing, already canceling meetings, already driving toward the one place I'd sworn never to return. The highway stretched before me like a ribbon of memory. 4 hours from Seattle to Ashford. 4 hours to prepare myself for a man I'd spent half my life resenting. The mountains rose on either side, ancient and indifferent, and I thought about the last time I'd made this drive. It was for her funeral. My mother Isadora laid to rest in the family plot behind Ravenwood Manor, while my father stood silent as stone, his eyes dry. His face a mask. I'd blamed him then. I blamed him still. She'd died alone in a hospital room while he worked in his study, surrounded by his research, his books, his obsessions, too busy to notice his wife of 30 years slipping away, too absorbed in whatever academic puzzle consumed him to sit by her bedside in those final days. I was 18, leaving for college. The call came at midnight. She was gone. By the time I arrived, he'd already left the hospital. I found him at home in his study, the door locked. When he finally emerged, 3 days later, he looked at me with empty eyes and said only, "She understood." Understood what? That she came second to his work, that decades of devotion meant less than whatever mysteries he was unraveling in that book-lined tomb I left for college and never truly came back. Visits became shorter, conversations more strained, until finally we stopped pretending. I built my life. He remained in his. Two strangers sharing only a name and a grave between us. But now the highway was pulling me back, and I wasn't ready. I would never be ready. The rain started as I crossed into Ashford County. It always rained here. I'd forgotten that, or tried to. The drops fell heavy and relentless, turning the road into a dark mirror. I passed the exit for Millbrook, where I'd gone to high school, where Isadora used to take me for ice cream after baseball games. She'd been the warm one, the one who laughed easily, who filled the empty spaces of Ravenwood with light. Without her, the house had become a mausoleum. I'd packed in a hurry, throwing clothes into a bag without thinking, but somehow, impossibly, I'd packed her journal. I found it wedged between my shirts when I stopped for gas, a small leather-bound book I didn't remember owning, my mother's journal, one I'd never seen before. It must have been in a box I'd grabbed from storage last month when I moved to the new apartment. I'd been too busy to sort through it. Now sitting on the passenger seat beside me, it felt like a message from beyond the grave. I didn't open it, not yet. Not. The road demanded my attention, and I wasn't sure I wanted to read her words, to hear her voice again after all these years. Some ghosts were better left sleeping, but as the miles accumulated and Ashford drew closer, my hand kept drifting toward it, fingers tracing the worn leather cover like a talisman. Ravenwood Manor appeared through the rain like a memory made solid. The Victorian mansion stood on a hill overlooking the town, its turrets and gables dark against the gray sky. 3 stories of weathered stone and leaded glass, surrounded by ancient oaks that had stood sentinel since before the Civil War. My great-great-grandfather Bartholomew Thorne had built it in 1873 with money from timber and railroads. 5 generations had lived here. 5 generations of secrets. I parked in the circular drive, rain hammering on the roof of my car. For a long moment I just sat there, engine running, staring at the house that had haunted my dreams. Nothing had changed. The same iron gate, the same overgrown gardens, the same sense that the house was watching me with dark windows like eyes. The front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch, young, maybe 26 or 27, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore scrubs and carried an umbrella which she held out toward me in invitation. Not my father, then. The nurse Dr. Whitmore had mentioned. I killed the engine and ran through the rain. "Mr. Thorne," she had a slight southern accent, warm despite the weather. "I'm Evangeline Graves. I've been looking after your father." Evangeline Graves. The name felt like something from a Gothic novel, fitting for this house, this family, this whole dark fairy tale. "How is he?" I asked, water dripping from my hair. "Stable, resting?" "He doesn't talk much, but then he never did." She smiled, a flash of warmth that seemed out of place here. "Come inside. You must be exhausted." The entrance hall was exactly as I remembered. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, a grand staircase sweeping upward into shadow. The air smelled of old books and furniture polish and something else, decay maybe, or just the weight of too many years pressing down on one place. "I've prepared the blue room for you," Evangeline said, shaking out the umbrella. "Your old room. I hope that's all right." My old room, where I'd spent countless nights as a boy listening to my parents argue in whispers down the hall, where I'd hidden after my mother's funeral, refusing to come out for 2 days. The thought of sleeping there again made my skin crawl. "That's fine," I lied. "Your father's upstairs, first door on the right, his bedroom. He's been asking for you." I doubted that. Aldrich Thorne didn't ask for anyone, but I nodded and started up the stairs, each step creaking under my weight like a warning. He looked smaller than I remembered. Aldrich Thorne sat in a leather chair by the window, a blanket across his lap, staring out at the rain-soaked grounds. At 75, he should have been vital commanding, but the stroke had stolen something from him. His right hand trembled slightly. His face, always severe, now seemed carved from wax. "Father," I said from the doorway. He didn't turn. For a long moment I thought he hadn't heard me. Then slowly his head swiveled in my direction. His eyes, still sharp, still that cold gray I remembered, fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to step back. Dashiell. My full name, which he'd insisted on using even when everyone else called me Dash. "You came," Dr. Whitmore called. "I told them not to bother you." His voice was rough, strained. "You have your own life now." The bitterness in those words could have stripped paint. I stepped into the room, hands in my pockets, feeling 16 again, feeling small. "You're my father. Where else would I be?" He laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. "Anywhere but here. Isn't that what you've spent a decade proving?" We stared at each other across the space of the room, across the chasm of 10 years' silence. I wanted to leave. I wanted to say cruel things. I wanted to be anywhere but in this house with this man reliving old wounds. But Evangeline's voice drifted up from downstairs, humming something soft and sad, and it reminded me why I'd come. Duty, responsibility, the weight of being the only one left. "How are you feeling?" I asked, the words stiff and formal, like an old man waiting to die. He turned back to the window. "But there are things that must be done first, things you need to know." "About what?" "About why she died, Dashiell, about why you're here." My blood went cold. Mother died of cancer. There's nothing mysterious about it. Is that what you think? He reached for a glass of water on the side table, his hand shaking so badly that water sloshed over the rim. "You know nothing. You've known nothing for 10 years because you ran away before the truth could find you." I moved forward without thinking, taking the glass from his trembling hand. Our fingers touched briefly, his skin paper-thin and cold. What truth? But he'd closed his eyes, sinking back into the chair like a man carrying an unbearable weight. "Not yet. You're not ready yet. First you must understand what this house is, what this family is, what you are." I'm an architect from Seattle. That's all I am. His eyes opened, and in them I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. You're a thorn, he said quietly, and we are anything but ordinary. I left him there and retreated to my old room. The blue room was unchanged, same four-poster bed, same writing desk by the window, same bookshelf filled with childhood favorites I hadn't touched in decades. Evangeline had placed fresh flowers on the dresser, an attempt at warmth in a cold space. I dropped my bag on the bed and pulled out my mother's journal. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed. I opened it at random, and her handwriting bloomed before me like a ghost made of ink. March 15th, 2005. Aldrich doesn't know I've been to see Dr. Halifax again. The tests came back this morning. It spread to the lymph nodes. Stage 3, they're calling it now. Maybe 6 months if I'm lucky. A year at most. I can't tell him. Not yet. He's so close to finishing the research, so close to understanding what our family truly is. If he knew, he'd abandon everything to save me. And I can't let that happen. Some things are more important than one life. Some truths are worth dying for. The words blurred as my eyes filled with moisture I refused to acknowledge. She'd known. For months, maybe longer, she'd known she was dying and kept it secret. Not from cruelty, but from what loves sacrifice. The need to protect my father's work, whatever that work was. I flipped through more pages, reading in fragments. He's discovered something about the Thorn bloodline. Something genetic. Something that explains the dreams, the intuitions, the way we all seem to know things we shouldn't know. I'm afraid of what it means. I'm more afraid of what it will cost. There's a woman named Dr. Mirabelle Frost. She's been helping with the research. I trust her more than I trust myself sometimes. If anything happens to me, she'll know what to do. Dr. Mirabelle Frost, another name to add to the growing list of mysteries. I made a mental note to find her, to ask the questions my father clearly wouldn't answer. But as I read on, a different truth emerged, one that made my hands shake as I turned the pages. I need to tell Dashiell the truth about what runs in his blood, about what's coming for him. But how do you tell your child that their life has an expiration date written in their genes? How do you explain that love is worth the price we pay? Aldrich says there's hope. Says the research might save our son. But I see it in his eyes, the fear that he's running out of time. We're both running out of time. The journal slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor with a sound like a door closing. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands over my face, trying to process what I'd just read. An expiration date, written in my genes. My mother had known something was wrong with me, something inherited, something deadly, and she'd kept that secret too. All those years I'd blamed my father for her death. But she'd been protecting me. They'd both been protecting me in their own broken ways. A soft knock at the door made me look up. "Mr. Thorn," Evangeline's voice gentle through the wood. "Dinner's ready if you're hungry." I wasn't hungry, but I opened the door anyway because the alternative was sitting alone with my mother's ghost and the terrible knowledge that I might be dying too. We ate in the dining room, a cavernous space with a table that could seat 20. Evangeline had set 2 places at one end, intimate despite the grandeur. My father remained upstairs, too weak or too stubborn to join us. So it was just the 2 of us, strangers, sharing a meal in a house full of secrets. "How long have you been taking care of him?" I asked, pushing food around my plate without eating. 3 months. She cut her chicken with careful precision. "Since the first minor stroke. Dr. Whitmore hired me through an agency, but I ended up staying. Your father's complicated, but he's not a bad man." I nearly laughed. "You don't know him like I do." "Maybe not, but I know grief when I see it." She met my eyes, and there was something knowing in her gaze. "He talks about your mother sometimes when he thinks I'm not listening." "What does he say?" "That he failed her. That he'd give anything to have one more day, one more hour to do things differently." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He mentions you too, says you have her eyes, Says he sees her every time he looks at you and it breaks his heart all over again. The chicken turned to ash in my mouth. I set down my fork, unable to continue the pretense of eating. If that's true, he has a strange way of showing it. Grief makes people strange. Evangeline stood collecting the plates. My grandmother used to say that love and pain are two sides of the same coin. The deeper the love, the sharper the pain when it's gone. Maybe your father loved your mother so much that losing her broke something in him he doesn't know how to fix. She left me alone with that thought. I sat in the empty dining room surrounded by portraits of dead thorns staring down from the walls with eyes like my own. 5 generations of them. 5 generations of secrets and silence and suffering. What had they known that I didn't? What curse ran through our blood? I found the locked door at midnight. I couldn't sleep. The blue room felt suffocating and my mother's journal kept calling to me from the nightstand. So I walked the halls of Ravenwood, relearning its geography, remembering which floorboards creaked and which rooms held which memories. That's when I noticed the door at the end of the east wing. It had always been there, of course, but when I was young it had been just another room my father's study off limits, but not mysterious. Now in the darkness, with a heavy padlock gleaming in the moonlight filtering through the hall window, it seemed to pulse with significance. I tried the handle, locked as expected. But as I touched the door, I felt something, a vibration, almost a thrumming beneath my palm like a heartbeat. Looking for something. I spun around. Evangeline stood in her nightgown, a candle in her hand, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like something from another century. I couldn't sleep, I said, pulling my hand back from the door as if burned. Neither could I. This house doesn't encourage rest. She moved closer, her candle casting dancing shadows. Your father keeps that room locked, has for years, according to Mrs. Ashcroft. Mrs. Ashcroft, the housekeeper. She comes 3 times a week. She's been with your family since before you were born. Evangeline studied the door with the same curiosity I felt. I asked her once what was in there. She said it was better not to know. Said the Thorns have always had their secrets and some secrets should stay buried. But you're curious, I said. She smiled, a flash of mischief that transformed her face. Aren't you? I was more than curious. I was desperate. Every instinct I had screamed that behind this door lay answers to my mother's cryptic journal entries, to my father's strange warnings, to the genetic curse that apparently ran in my veins. We could break the lock, I said, surprising myself. Evangeline's eyes widened. That's your father's private study, his sanctuary. He's the one who said I need to know the truth. Maybe the truth is in there. For a long moment we stood in the hallway, 2 people poised on the edge of a decision that would change everything. The house creaked around us, settling into its bones as if listening to see what we would choose. There's a toolbox in the kitchen, Evangeline finally said. I'll get the bolt cutters. The lock fell away with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent house. I pushed the door open and the smell hit me first, old paper, leather, and something chemical I couldn't identify. Formaldehyde, maybe, or preservatives. The smell of things kept too long in darkness. Evangeline held up her candle and the room revealed itself in pieces. It was larger than I'd expected, taking up the entire corner of the house. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined every wall, packed with volumes that looked ancient and valuable. A massive desk dominated the center, covered in papers, journals, and strange instruments I didn't recognize. Glass cases held what looked like medical specimens. I saw bones, tissue samples, preserved organs floating in jars of amber liquid. But it was the walls that made my breath catch. They were covered in genealogy charts, family trees stretching back centuries, written in meticulous handwriting I recognized as my father's. Lines connecting names, dates of birth, and death notes in the margins in multiple languages. And throughout, certain names were circled in red ink with notations that made my skin crawl. Died age 32, pulmonary failure. died age 29, cardiac arrest, died age 35, cerebral hemorrhage, died age 31, unknown causes. I moved closer, following the lines forward through the generations, watching the pattern emerge. Every Thorn who'd lived past 30 had died young, rarely making it past 35. Heart failure, strokes, sudden, unexplained deaths. Every single one. My eyes found my own name at the bottom of the current generation. Dashiell Thorn, born 1987. And next to it, in my father's handwriting, age 28, time remaining uncertain. "Dear God," Evangeline whispered from behind me. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed, my lungs forgotten how to pull in air. 28 years old. I was 28 years old, and according to this chart, I was living on borrowed time. "Dashiell, look at this." She was standing by the desk, holding up a leather-bound notebook. I crossed to her on numb legs and took it from her hands. The title page read, "The Thorn Curse, A Study in Genetic Destiny" by Aldrich Thorn. I flipped through the pages, scanning my father's research. Technical jargon mixed with desperate prose. Charts of DNA sequences, medical terminology I barely understood. But the conclusion was clear enough. The Thorn family carried a genetic mutation, something rare, something powerful, something deadly. It granted heightened intuition, the ability to sense patterns others couldn't see, to make leaps of logic that seemed almost precognitive. Artists, inventors, visionaries, the Thorns had been all of these things throughout history. But the same mutation that gave us these gifts also destroyed us. Around age 30, it triggered a cascade of neurological and cardiovascular failures. Our brains literally burned themselves out, using energy at a rate our bodies couldn't sustain. We were candles meant to burn bright and fast, then snuff out before we reached middle age. My mother had known. My father had known. And now I knew. I was going to die probably within the next 7 years, and there was nothing I could do about it. "Keep reading," Evangeline said softly, pointing to a page near the end. I forced my eyes to focus, but there is hope. Dr. Mirabelle Frost and I have identified a potential intervention, a combination of gene therapy and targeted medication that could suppress the mutation's lethal aspects while preserving the cognitive benefits. It's experimental, dangerous, but it might work. Isadora refused the treatment, said she'd rather live naturally and die on her own terms than risk the unknown side effects. I respected her choice. I will always respect her choice, but for Dashiell I will not give up. I cannot. He deserves a full life, a long life, free from this curse that has haunted our family for generations. Dr. Frost and I will find a way to save him, or I will die trying. The research must continue, for my son, for all the Thorns yet to come. The notebook fell from my hands and landed on the desk with a thud that seemed to shake the entire room. My father hadn't been neglecting my mother. He'd been trying to save her, and when she refused, he'd turned all his desperate energy toward saving me. Every hour in this study, every locked door, every moment of distance between us had been him fighting against time, against genetics, against fate itself. And I'd hated him for it. I'd spent 10 years hating him for trying to save my life. "Dashiell." Evangeline touched my arm gently. "Are you all right?" I wasn't all right. I would never be all right again, but I managed to nod, to pull myself together enough to speak. "We need to find Dr. Frost," I said. "If she's still alive, if she's still working on this research." "She is." We both spun around. My father stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on a cane, his face pale but his eyes burning with the same intensity I'd seen earlier. He must have heard us breaking into his study, must have dragged himself from his sickbed to confront us. "Dr. Frost is alive," he repeated, his voice stronger now, fueled by something like anger or hope or both. "She's been continuing the research in Boston. I've stayed in contact with her, sending her data, updating her on your health markers. You've been studying me." The words came out harsh, accusatory. "I've been trying to keep you alive." He moved into the room, each step careful and measured. "Every blood test, every physical exam I insisted you get before you left for college, I was collecting data. looking for signs of activation, praying it would skip you somehow even though I knew it wouldn't. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were young. Because I wanted you to have a normal life for as long as possible. Because... His voice cracked and I saw moisture in his eyes for the first time in my life. Because your mother made me promise. In her final days when she knew the end was close, she made me swear I wouldn't burden you with this knowledge until absolutely necessary. And when is absolutely necessary? I demanded. When I drop dead of a heart attack at 32, when you're ready to fight. He met my eyes, and I saw in him something I'd never seen before, not the cold academic, not the distant father, but a man who'd lost everything and was clinging to the last thing he had left. Your mother chose acceptance. I'm offering you a choice. She never had the chance to survive this, but it will take courage, it will take trust, and it will take us working together. I looked around the study at the genealogy charts, the research notes, the preserved specimens that represented generations of thorns who'd burned bright and died young. Then I looked at Evangeline, who'd witnessed this entire revelation with wide eyes, and finally back at my father. Tell me everything, I said. Start from the beginning. Tell me what we are. He nodded slowly, then moved to his desk chair and lowered himself into it with a wince. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of centuries. We need to go back to 1823, he said, to your great-great-great-grandfather Cornelius Thorne and the bargain he made that cursed us all. My father's voice filled the study like smoke, thick and suffocating. Cornelius Thorne was a brilliant man, too brilliant perhaps. A physician at a time when medicine was more guesswork than science, when bloodletting was considered treatment and disease was blamed on bad air. Aldrich leaned back in his chair, eyes distant, seeing something beyond this room. He became obsessed with understanding the human mind, why some people could see patterns others missed, why certain families produced generation after generation of prodigies. I pulled up a chair, my legs unsteady. Evangeline remained standing, candle still in hand, her face half in shadow. He experimented on himself first, my father continued. Compounds derived from plants, minerals, substances we'd consider toxic today. He kept meticulous records there in the vault beneath this house. Page after page of formulas, observations, side effects. Most killed him slowly, but one changed him. What kind of change? I asked. He could think faster, see connections invisible to others, diagnose illnesses with a glance, predict outcomes with uncanny accuracy. Within 5 years, he'd revolutionized medical practice in 3 states. Within 10, he was wealthy beyond measure, but the gift came with a price. Aldrich stood slowly, moving to one of the glass cases. Inside lay a daguerreotype, a man in his early 30s, sharp-featured with eyes that seemed to burn even through the faded image. My eyes, my face separated by nearly 2 centuries. He died at 34, heart failure. His son Ambrose inherited both the fortune and the mutation, died at 31. Then came Bartholomew, who built this house, dead at 35. Then Montgomery, then Archibald, then my father Thaddeus. He traced his finger down the glass. All brilliant, all cursed, all dead before they could see 40. But you're 75, I said. He turned to me and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt. I'm the exception. The mutation skipped me entirely. I'm a genetic dead end, a carrier who doesn't express the trait. I can pass it on, but I don't suffer its effects. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I watched my father die when I was 23. Watched him burn himself out, chasing his obsessions, knowing I could never follow in his footsteps because I lacked the gift, the curse, whatever you want to call it. So you married Mother, I said slowly, pieces clicking together. You married someone from a normal family, hoping to dilute the bloodline. I married Isadora because I loved her. The words came out sharp, defensive. But yes, I hoped. I prayed that maybe, just maybe, you would be spared. But I wasn't. No. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 75 years. You showed signs early. The way you could solve puzzles meant for children twice your age. The dreams you had that came true. The way you'd know things you couldn't possibly know. By the time you were 10, I was certain. By 15, I was desperate. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I stood abruptly, needing to move to escape the weight of his words. "Why didn't Mother tell me?" I demanded. "Why did she write it all in her journal but never say it to my face?" "Because she was dying, Dashiell, and because she believed—" His voice broke. "She believed that if you knew about the curse too early, you'd live your life in fear. She wanted you to have normalcy for as long as possible, to fall in love, build a career, experience joy without the shadow of death hanging over everything." I thought of my life in Seattle, my firm, my carefully constructed existence where everything was controlled, planned, predictable. Had I been living or just postponing the inevitable? "What about Dr. Frost?" Evangeline spoke for the first time since my father had entered. "You said she's still working on the cure." Aldrich nodded gratefully, latching onto the change in subject. "Mirabelle Frost. She approached me 30 years ago, a geneticist who'd stumbled upon references to the Thorne family in historical medical journals. She was fascinated by the pattern. She wanted to study us, understand us. Your mother volunteered to participate in her research." He pulled out a drawer and removed a file thick with papers. "They became friends, close friends. When Isadora got sick, Mirabelle dropped everything to help. But your mother refused aggressive treatment, said she'd lived fully and had no regrets." His hands trembled as he opened the file. "Before she died, they made a pact. Mirabelle would continue the research. She'd find a way to cure the curse for you." I took the file from him, scanning pages of genetic sequences and medical terminology that meant nothing to me. But at the bottom of one page, I saw my mother's handwriting for Dash. "So he can have the life we couldn't give Aldrich's father or his father before him." So the cycle ends. "Where is she now?" I asked, my voice rough. "Boston. She runs a private research facility officially studying rare genetic disorders, but her real focus has always been the Thorne mutation. She's been waiting for you to be ready. I need to see her." "There's something else first," my father said. "Something your mother left for you. For both of us. In her final letter, she mentioned documents research she and Mirabelle conducted separately. She hid them somewhere safe, somewhere I wouldn't find them until the right time." "Where?" "St. Mary's Church, the old one on the edge of town. It's been abandoned for 15 years, but your mother volunteered there before she got sick. She must have hidden something in the vault." He looked at me with haunted eyes. "We need to go there, tomorrow. Find out what she left behind." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw family trees written in blood. Saw my name circled in red, saw the number 35 like a countdown clock ticking toward 0. So I lay in the blue room, staring at the ceiling, listening to Ravenwood settle and creak around me. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up and went downstairs. The kitchen was dark, but I found the light switch and blinked against the sudden brightness. The room was massive, a fireplace large enough to roast a pig, copper pots hanging from iron hooks, a farmhouse table that had probably been here since the house was built. "Can't sleep either." I jumped. Evangeline sat at the table, a mug of tea in her hands, looking exhausted but somehow still put together. "How long have you been down here?" I asked. "Since midnight. I keep thinking about what we found, what it means." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Want some tea? It's chamomile. Supposed to help you relax." I sat, accepting the mug she poured from a ceramic pot. The tea was warm and faintly sweet, tasting of honey and something floral. "Tell me about Louisiana," I said, suddenly needing to think about anything except dying. She blinked, surprised. "Louisiana, what do you want to know? Anything, everything, what it's like, why you left." A slow smile spread across her face. "Louisiana is complicated, beautiful and broken at the same time. I grew up in the bayou near Lafayette. My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 6. I'm sorry. Don't be. Grand-mère was wonderful, taught me everything: how to cook gumbo, how to read the weather, how to know when someone's lying just by watching their hands. She wrapped both hands around her mug. She also taught me that death is just part of life. We had a saying, laissez le bon temps rouler, let the good times roll. Because you never know when your time's up, so you might as well enjoy what you've got. Sounds like she and my mother would have gotten along. Probably. Evangeline took a sip of tea. Grand-mère died when I was 21. Breast cancer, fast and brutal. I watched her waste away in 3 months, and I decided right then that I wanted to help people. Went to nursing school, got my degree, started working hospice care. That must be hard, watching people die. It is, but it's also beautiful in a way. Being there for someone's last moments, making sure they're not alone, that they're comfortable and cared for. She met my eyes. Your mother died alone, didn't she? That's what you think. The tea turned bitter in my mouth. My father was in his study. He was there. Evangeline's voice was gentle but firm. He told me, late one night when he was in pain and the medication made him talkative. He was at the hospital every single day for the last week. Held her hand for 72 hours straight at the end. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat there talking to her, reading to her, telling her he loved her. I stared at her, the words not making sense. But when I got there, he'd left an hour before, couldn't bear to see you in that room looking at her like that, couldn't bear the guilt of knowing he hadn't saved her, hadn't been smart enough or fast enough. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. He's been carrying that for 10 years, Dashiell, thinking you blame him for abandoning her when the truth is he never left her side. The kitchen blurred. I pulled my hand away, swiping at my eyes angrily. Why didn't he tell me? Because grief makes people do strange things. Because he thought you hated him and didn't know how to bridge that gap. Because talking about it meant reliving the worst moment of his life. Evangeline stood, moved around the table, and put her hand on my shoulder. But you're here now. You know the truth now. Maybe it's time to stop punishing each other for the past and start fighting for the future. I looked up at her, this woman I barely knew who'd somehow become essential in the span of 2 days. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, catching the kitchen light like fire. Her eyes were kind but not pitying, strong. Thank you, I said, for being here, for not running away when my family's madness revealed itself. She smiled. I'm from Louisiana. We've got our own brand of madness down there. This is almost normal by comparison. Despite everything, I laughed. Morning came gray and cold. My father was already awake when I went downstairs, dressed and ready despite his weakened state. He'd arranged for a car, Mrs. Ashcroft's nephew, who drove for the church on Sundays and didn't ask questions. Are you sure you're well enough for this? I asked as he struggled into his coat. I've been waiting for this moment for 10 years, he said. I'm not missing it because of a minor stroke. St. Mary's stood at the edge of town, separated from the newer buildings by a field of wild grass and forgotten graves. The church itself was Gothic Revival, all pointed arches and stained glass, built in 1890-something by the same architect who'd designed the courthouse. It had been beautiful once. Now it was just abandoned windows, broken roofs, sagging nature slowly reclaiming what man had built. We parked in the overgrown lot. The driver, a taciturn man named Leon, said he'd wait, and my father led us toward the side entrance. Your mother had a key to the vault, he explained, pulling out a heavy iron key I'd never seen before. The parish gave it to her when she started volunteering. After she died, I found it in her jewelry box with a note for when Dashiell is ready. The side door opened with a groan of rusted hinges. Inside the church was dim and dusty light filtering through broken windows in pale shafts. Pews lay scattered, some broken, others stacked against walls. The altar had been stripped, leaving only bare wood and the ghost of where a cross had hung. This way, my father said, moving toward a door behind what had once been the sacristy. The vault was in the basement, a small room with stone walls and a heavy wooden door that looked medieval. My father fitted the key into the lock, and it turned with surprising ease, as if someone had oiled it recently. Inside was darkness, I pulled out my phone using the flashlight to illuminate the space. It was barely 10 feet square, lined with shelves that held old records, sacramental vessels, boxes of candles. But in the back, covered with a cloth, was a metal safe I recognized from my childhood. The one that had been in my mother's closet, the one she'd told me held important papers. "She moved it here," my father breathed. "She moved it here so I wouldn't destroy it if I got desperate." The safe required a combination. My father tried his birthday, my mother's mine. Nothing. He stood there, frustrated fingers hovering over the dial. "Try her favorite number," I said, suddenly remembering. 17. She always said 17 was lucky. He tried it. 1717. The safe clicked open. Inside were three things: a leather portfolio, a flash drive, and a letter addressed to both of us in my mother's handwriting. My father's hands shook too badly to open it, so I did reading aloud in the dim basement of an abandoned church. "My darlings, if you're reading this, it means you found each other again. Found your way past the grief and the blame and the silence to this moment. I'm so proud of you both. Aldrich, my love, stop punishing yourself. You didn't fail me. You gave me 30 beautiful years, a son I adored, and a purpose in my final months. The research Mirabelle and I completed is in this portfolio. It's more advanced than what you knew about. We found something, a breakthrough that could save Dashiell with minimal risk. But I made Mirabelle promise not to share it until you and our son reconciled. Because if you're working together, if you've forgiven each other, then you'll have the strength to see this through. Dashiell, my sweet boy, don't be angry at your father for keeping secrets. We both did what we thought was right, even if we were wrong. The important thing is that you have a choice now. The treatment exists. It works. We tested it successfully on cell cultures derived from your blood samples. You can live, baby. You can have a full life, but you have to be brave enough to try. The flash drive contains all our data protocols, contact information for Mirabelle. Everything you need. I love you both more than words can express. Now stop reading this letter and go save my son. All my love, Isadora." My father was crying, silent tears streaming down his weathered face. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my pocket, then picked up the portfolio and flash drive. "We should go," I said quietly. "Call Dr. Frost, set up a meeting." He nodded, unable to speak, and we left the vault together, two men carrying the weight of a dead woman's love and the hope that it might be enough to save what remained. Dr. Frost answered on the second ring. "Aldrich." Her voice was sharp, alert despite the early hour. "Has something happened?" "We found it," my father said into the phone, his voice thick with emotion. "Isadora's research. Everything. It's all here." There was a long pause, then, "I'm coming to you. Don't do anything until I get there. Don't even look at the data. I need to be there when you open it. Mirabelle, it's a 4-hour drive from Boston. I'll be there in 3, she said and hung up. We returned to Ravenwood to wait. Evangeline made coffee and breakfast that none of us could eat. My father retreated to his bedroom, exhausted from the morning's excursion. I sat in the conservatory, a glass-enclosed room I'd forgotten existed, surrounded by plants. My mother had loved holding the portfolio like a holy relic. I didn't open it. Mirabelle had said to wait, and somehow that felt important. Like opening it without her would be a betrayal of the 3 women, my mother, Evangeline, and this stranger I'd never met who'd made this moment possible. Instead, I read my mother's letter again, and again, and again, until I had it memorized, until her voice was clear in my head, until I could almost feel her presence in the room. "You really loved her, didn't you?" Evangeline said from the doorway. "She was my mother. Of course I loved her. No, I mean really loved her. The way most people love their mothers when they're 6, but by 16 they're embarrassed by them." She moved into the room, settling into the wicker chair across from me. "You still talk about her like she hung the moon." "She did," I said simply. "At least she did for me." Evangeline was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When I first came here, I thought your father was just a cold old man who'd neglected his wife and alienated his son. But the longer I stayed, the more I saw the truth. He's still in love with her. Desperately, completely in love. Every room in this house is a shrine to her memory. The garden, the conservatory, the way he insists on fresh flowers in the dining room even though he eats alone. She leaned forward. He never moved on because he couldn't imagine loving anyone else. She was it for him, his whole world, and when she died, his world ended. Then why push me away? Because you look just like her. Because seeing you meant confronting what he'd lost. Because grief is selfish and irrational and makes people do terrible things to the people they love most. She reached out, took my hand. But he's trying now. Trying to make it right. Trying to save you the way he couldn't save her. That counts for something. Before I could respond, we heard a car in the drive. Dr. Mirabelle Frost had arrived. She swept into Ravenwood like a force of nature. 78 years old, but moving with the energy of someone half that age, white hair pulled back in a severe bun. Eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a tailored suit and carried a leather briefcase, and when she saw me in the conservatory, she stopped dead. "Dear God," she breathed. "You're the image of her, exactly as she was when we first met. Dr. Frost, I presume. Mirabelle, please. We're past formalities." She set down her briefcase and moved closer, studying me with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. "How are you feeling? Any headaches, dizziness, visual disturbances?" "No, I feel fine." "That's good. That's very good. It means the mutation hasn't fully activated yet." She turned to Evangeline. "You must be the nurse Aldrich mentioned, Evangeline Graves." "Yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. It makes me feel ancient." She smiled, a quick flash that softened her severe features. "Where's Aldrich?" "Resting upstairs. The trip to the church exhausted him." "I'll check on him shortly, but first—" She turned back to me. "The portfolio, may I see it?" I handed it over. She opened it with reverent care, pulling out page after page of handwritten notes, graphs, chemical formulas, annotated DNA sequences. Her hands trembled slightly as she read, and I saw her eyes fill with moisture. "She finished it," Mirabelle whispered. "She actually finished it. The final protocol, the one we'd been working toward for years. It's all here." "And it works?" I asked. "According to this, yes. We tested it on cell cultures derived from your blood samples I'd collected over the years at Aldrich's request. The mutation was successfully suppressed without significant side effects. The cells remained viable, healthy, normal." She looked up at me. "This could save you, Dashiell. This could end the curse." Hope flared in my chest, bright and painful. "What do we need to do?" "The treatment requires specialized equipment, gene therapy delivered directly to your neural tissue combined with a medication regimen to stabilize the process." She closed the portfolio. "I have everything we need at my facility in Boston. We could start immediately, but what? But I need to run current tests first, make sure the mutation hasn't progressed too far. If it has, if your neural pathways have already started degrading, the treatment could do more harm than good." She stood all business now. "I'll need to draw blood, run a full neurological exam, analyze your recent health records. Evangeline, can you assist?" "Of course." "Good. We'll start now." She picked up her briefcase. "Dashiell, I want you to know something. Your mother was one of the bravest, most brilliant people I've ever known. She faced death with grace and used her final months to ensure you wouldn't have to. Whatever happens, you honor her memory by fighting as hard as she fought for you." The tests took hours. Mirabelle set up a makeshift lab in the basement, the same basement where my father had hidden his research, where generations of Thorne's secrets were stored. She drew vial after vial of blood, attached electrodes to my head. Shined lights in my eyes, asked me to solve puzzles and remember sequences and perform tasks designed to measure cognitive function. Through it all, Evangeline assisted with quiet competence, labeling samples, recording data, offering water when my mouth went dry from answering questions. My father joined us halfway through, leaning heavily on his cane but determined to be present. He sat in the corner watching with haunted eyes as Mirabelle documented every aspect of my genetic curse. "How does it look?" he asked, finally unable to stay silent. Mirabelle didn't answer immediately. She finished notating something on her tablet, then removed her glasses to rub her eyes. "The mutation is active," she said carefully. "His neurological markers are elevated proteins associated with accelerated neural activity, increased metabolic demand on brain tissue. He's in the early stages of what killed his ancestors." My father made a sound like he'd been stabbed. "But," Mirabelle continued, "it's not too late. The degradation is minimal. If we start treatment within the next few weeks, I'm confident we can suppress the mutation before it causes irreversible damage." "Weeks," I said, "not months. The progression has accelerated in the past 72 hours. Coming home, the stress of confronting your father, learning about the curse, it's triggered a spike in activity. Your brain is working overtime, burning through resources faster than your body can supply them." She met my eyes. "We need to act quickly." "Then let's do it. Now. Today. It's not that simple. The treatment takes time to prepare, and we can't do it here. We need to return to Boston, to my facility, where I have the proper equipment." She glanced at my father. "Can you travel? For this, I'd crawl to Boston if I had to." Mirabelle nodded. "Then we leave tomorrow morning, first thing. Pack for a week. The initial treatment takes 6 hours, but you'll need monitoring for at least 72 hours afterward." That night, I found myself in the garden. Sleep was impossible. Tomorrow, I'd leave for Boston, submit myself to an experimental procedure that might save my life or kill me outright. The uncertainty was crushing a weight on my chest that made breathing difficult. The roses were blooming despite the late-season hardy varieties my mother had chosen specifically because they thrived in adversity. I knelt beside them, running my fingers over soft petals, breathing in perfume that smelled like memory. "She'd be proud of you, you know." I looked up. My father stood at the edge of the garden, silhouetted against the house lights. "For what?" "For being terrified. For being brave enough to try." He moved closer, each step careful. "Your mother had the same choice: undergo Mirabelle's experimental treatment or accept her fate. She chose acceptance because she'd lived fully loved, deeply, had no regrets. But you have so much life ahead of you, so much to experience. She wanted that for you more than anything. What if it doesn't work?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll have lost both of you, and I'll have to find a way to live with that. But at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have fought instead of just surrendering." I stood facing him in the moonlight. "I'm scared." "I know, so am I." He reached out tentatively, and I closed the distance, letting him pull me into an embrace that felt foreign and familiar all at once. "But we'll face it together, father and son, the way we should have all along." We stood there in the garden, in the place my mother had loved, surrounded by the beauty she'd created, and for the first time in 10 years, the silence between us felt like peace instead of punishment. Evangeline found me an hour later, still in the garden. "Leon's confirmed for tomorrow," she said, settling onto the stone bench beside me. 5 a.m. departure. Mirabelle wants to start the treatment by noon. "That fast?" She says waiting only increases the risk. Evangeline tucked her hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture I was learning to recognize. "I'm coming with you. To Boston. Your father will need help, and you'll need, well, someone." "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I want to." She turned to face me, and in the moonlight her eyes were luminous. "I know we barely know each other. I know this is all happening incredibly fast, but I feel like I don't know, like I'm supposed to be here, like this is where I'm meant to be. Even if I die on that table. Even then." She took my hand, lacing our fingers together. "My grand-mère used to say that some people come into your life for a reason. They show up exactly when you need them, exactly as you need them. Maybe I'm your reason, Dashiell, or maybe you're mine. Either way, I'm not going anywhere." I looked at our joined hands, at this woman who'd appeared in my life at the exact moment everything fell apart. "When this is over, if I survive, I'd like to take you to dinner. A real date. Somewhere nice, somewhere that isn't haunted by dead relatives and genetic curses." She laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. "I'd like that. But fair warning, I'm from Louisiana. My idea of nice is probably different from yours. I'll take my chances." She leaned in and kissed me soft, brief, a promise more than passion. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "You're going to survive this," she said firmly. "You're going to have that dinner date and 100 more after it. You're going to live Dashiell Thorne. I won't accept any other outcome." I wanted to believe her, wanted to have her certainty, her faith, but all I could do was hold her hand and hope that hope was enough. We left for Boston at dawn. The drive took 4.5 hours through gray November landscape, trees stripped, bare fields lying fallow. Leon drove in silence while my father dozed in the front seat. Evangeline beside me in the back, her hand never leaving mine. I watched the miles accumulate, each one taking me further from everything familiar and closer to a future that was anything but certain. My phone buzzed periodically with messages from my firm clients wondering when I'd return, projects that needed attention, a life in Seattle that felt increasingly distant. I answered none of them. Mirabelle had gone ahead, leaving at 3 a.m. to ensure everything was ready. She'd called twice during the drive with updates I barely processed, medical jargon washing over me like waves. "How are you holding up?" Evangeline asked as we crossed into Massachusetts. "Ask me again after the treatment." "I'm asking you now." I thought about it. How was I holding up? I was driving to submit myself to an experimental gene therapy that had never been tested on a living human. I'd learned 3 days ago that I was genetically cursed to die young. I'd reconciled with a father I'd hated for a decade. I'd found myself developing feelings for a woman I'd known less than a week. "I'm terrified," I said honestly, "and angry and grateful and confused. I feel like I'm experiencing every emotion simultaneously and none of them makes sense." She squeezed my hand. "That sounds about right." "How are you so calm?" "I'm not. I'm just better at hiding it." She smiled, but I saw the fear beneath it. I've seen a lot of people face scary medical procedures. The ones who do best are the ones who acknowledge they're afraid but do it anyway. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. "Your grandmother again?" "Actually, that one's mine." The Frost Institute occupied an unremarkable building in Cambridge, 3 stories of red brick that could have been an office complex or a small hospital. Nothing about it screamed cutting-edge genetic research facility, which I supposed was the point. Mirabelle met us at the entrance, looking more severe than ever in a white lab coat. "Everything's ready," she said without preamble. "Dashiell, you'll come with me. The rest of you can wait in the family area, 3rd floor, room 301. "I'm going with him," Evangeline said firmly. "The procedure is delicate. We can't have— I'm a surgical nurse with 8 years' experience. I can assist." Evangeline's voice left no room for argument. "Besides, he shouldn't be alone." Mirabelle studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine. But you follow my instructions exactly. No improvisation." "Understood." My father stepped forward, gripping my shoulder with surprising strength. "I'll be waiting, right outside, not leaving until you walk out of there on your own 2 feet. "What if I don't?" His voice was fierce. "You will. Because you're a thorn and we're too stubborn to die before our time, even when our time is stupidly young." I managed a weak smile, then followed Mirabelle into the building. The treatment room looked like something from a science fiction film. A modified surgical chair dominated the center, surrounded by equipment I didn't recognize. Monitors. Stands a massive machine with cables running to a helmet-like apparatus. The walls were lined with computers, their screens displaying scrolling data that meant nothing to me. "This is the gene therapy delivery system," Mirabelle explained, gesturing to the helmet. "You'll be sedated during the procedure. The treatment takes approximately 6 hours. Afterward, you'll need constant monitoring for at least 72 hours. We have a recovery room prepared on the 4th floor. "What are the risks?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Brain damage, paralysis, personality changes, death. The gene therapy has to be delivered directly to your neural tissue. We're essentially rewriting your genetic code while your brain is still using it. It's like replacing the engine of a car while it's driving down the highway. And if it works, you live." a normal lifespan, normal health. The mutation becomes dormant, unable to destroy you from the inside out. She moved to the equipment, checking connections with practiced hands. Your mother and I spent 15 years developing this protocol. We tested it on cell cultures, animal models, computer simulations. The success rate in controlled conditions is 93%. But you're not a cell culture. You're a living, breathing human with a brain that might react unpredictably. So what are my actual odds? 73% chance of complete success, 20% chance of partial success with manageable side effects, 7% chance of catastrophic failure. She met my eyes. Those are the best odds I can give you, Dashiell. They're infinitely better than doing nothing. I looked at Evangeline, who'd been listening in silence. What do you think? I think you came here to fight, so fight. They prepared me like a sacrifice, hospital gown, IV line, electrodes attached to my chest, my temples, my wrists. Each sensor was a tether binding me to the machines that would either save my life or watch it end. I lay back in the chair, not comfortable but not unbearable, and stared at the ceiling while Mirabelle made final adjustments. The sedation will feel like falling, she explained, filling a syringe with clear liquid. Don't fight it. Your subconscious may create dreams or hallucinations as the therapy rewrites your neural pathways. Whatever you see, remember it isn't real. What kind of hallucinations? Memories, usually. The brain trying to make sense of what's happening. Some patients report conversations with dead relatives. She paused. Given your family history, that's likely. Great. 6 hours unconscious while my dead mother lectures me from beyond the grave. My father appeared at the doorway looking small and fragile and more frightened than I'd ever seen him. I love you, son, he said, his voice thick. I should have said it more, should have shown it better. But I love you more than my own life, more than this cursed gift we carry, more than anything. I know, I said and meant it. I love you too, Dad. Dad. I hadn't called him that since I was 12. His eyes glistened, but he blinked the moisture away, squeezed my shoulder once more, then stepped back to let Mirabelle work. Evangeline appeared on my other side, checking the IV line. You're going to be fine, she said with more confidence than the situation warranted. And when you wake up, I'm making you the biggest breakfast you've ever seen. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, grits, the works. I'll hold you to that. She smiled, but I saw the fear behind it. We barely knew each other, yet somehow in the past few days, she'd become essential, a bright spot in the darkness, a reason to survive this. Ready. Mirabelle stood with the syringe poised above my IV port. Was I ready? Ready to have my brain rewired, ready to possibly die or wake up as someone else. Ready to bet everything on 73% odds, no. I would never be ready, but I nodded anyway. She injected the sedative. The world began to tilt, to blur, to fall away like sand through my fingers. I heard my father's voice saying something I couldn't quite catch. Felt Evangeline's hand on my shoulder. Saw Mirabelle's face hovering above me like a moon in a darkening sky. Then I was falling just like she'd promised, falling down into darkness that had no bottom and no end. I woke in my mother's garden. Not the overgrown, neglected space that surrounded Ravenwood now, but the garden as it had been when I was 10. Roses in full bloom, their perfume thick and sweet. Lavender bordering the stone path, the fountain in the center flowing with clear water that caught the sunlight like diamonds. And there, kneeling by the rose bushes with dirt on her hands and joy on her face, was Isadora Thorne. My mother. You're not real, I said, but my voice cracked on the words. She looked up and her smile was exactly as I remembered, warm, unconditional, full of love that asked nothing in return. Does it matter? You're here, I'm here. Let's not waste time arguing about metaphysics. She stood brushing dirt from her gardening apron, and I saw her as she'd been before the cancer, healthy, vibrant, alive in a way that made my chest ache with loss. I've missed you, I whispered. I know. I've missed you too. She moved closer and I caught the scent of her perfume, jasmine and vanilla, the smell of every childhood memory worth keeping. But we don't have much time. The treatment is working, but your brain is fighting it. You need to make a choice. What choice? Whether to hold on or let go. She gestured around the garden. This place, it's a construct of your subconscious, a safe harbor while your neural pathways are being rewritten. But you can stay here, slip deeper into the dream, never wake up. It would be painless, easy, just letting go. That's dying, I said. That's choosing peace over pain. Her expression grew serious. Dashiell, the life ahead of you won't be easy. Even if the treatment works, you'll carry scars. Memories of what you've learned about our family. The weight of everyone who died so you could have this chance. That's a heavy burden for one person to bear. So you're saying I should give up, die in that chair? I'm saying you have a choice. You've always had a choice. That's what your father and I tried to give you, agency over your own fate. She reached out, cupping my face in her hands the way she had when I was small. But if you choose to live, you have to truly live. Not half measures, not hiding in your work or building walls to keep people out. You have to open yourself to love, to pain, to all the messy, beautiful chaos of being human. Moisture streamed down my face, so I don't know if I'm strong enough. You're a thorn. Strength is in our blood along with the curse. She smiled sadly. And you're my son, which means you're stronger than you think, braver than you believe, more loved than you'll ever know. The garden began to fade, colors bleeding into watercolor washes. Wait. I grabbed for her, but my hands passed through mist. I'm not ready. You're never ready for the people you love to leave, she said, her voice growing distant. But that doesn't make the love any less real. Remember that, Dashiell. Love doesn't require time. It only requires truth. Mom, wake up, sweetheart. Wake up and live. Make me proud. The garden dissolved into white light and I was falling again, but this time toward something instead of away. Toward voices and beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic. Toward life. Toward a future I'd have to fight for. I opened my eyes to blinding white light and the rhythmic beeping of machines. Pain crashed over me in waves, my head splitting, my muscles screaming, every nerve ending on fire. I tried to move and couldn't, tried to speak and managed only a groan. He's awake. Evangeline's face appeared above me, blurry but unmistakable. Dr. Frost Aldrich, he's awake. Footsteps rushed toward me. My father's face joined Evangeline's, moisture streaming down his cheeks, mouth moving in words I couldn't quite hear over the ringing in my ears. Mirabelle's voice cut through the fog. Dashiell, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you understand. I focused every ounce of willpower into my right hand. Felt fingers that didn't seem quite connected to my body clench around something warm and solid. Good, that's good. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. The procedure worked, your neural markers have stabilized, genetic expression has been suppressed. You're going to live, Dashiell. Do you understand? You're going to live. The words penetrated slowly, finding their way through pain and confusion to the part of my brain that could still process meaning. I was going to live. The thorn curse had finally been broken. I tried to speak, managed a whisper. Mom, I saw her. I know. My father said, his voice thick with emotion. Rest now. We're here. We're not going anywhere. I let my eyes close, let the darkness take me again. But this time it wasn't falling. It was floating, drifting, safe in the knowledge that when I woke again, there would be a future waiting. A future I'd earned. Recovery was brutal. 3 days in the treatment facility hooked to machines, while my body learned to function with its new genetic code. Headaches that made me weep. Nausea that left me hollow and shaking. Moments where I forgot who I was, where I was, what year it was, but gradually the fog lifted. Mirabelle monitored me, constantly running tests every 6 hours, adjusting medications, explaining in her crisp voice what was happening inside my rewired brain. The gene therapy had worked, my mutation was locked in a dormant state, unable to express itself, unable to kill me. But my neurons had to remap themselves, create new pathways, learn to operate without the heightened intuition that had always been my birthright. You may notice changes, she warned on the fourth day when I could finally sit up without vomiting. The thorn gift was part of your cognitive baseline. Without it, your brain will process information differently, more methodically perhaps, less intuitively. Will I still be me? That depends on how you define yourself. Are you the sum of your genetic advantages or something more? She adjusted my IV drip. Personally, I think you'll discover who you really are now that the mutation isn't clouding the picture. My father visited every hour, bringing books, food I couldn't eat, stories about my mother I'd never heard. He told me about their courtship, how Isadora had pursued him, not the other way around, how she'd made him laugh when he'd forgotten how she'd seen past the curse to the man beneath. She saved me, he said on the fifth day, sitting beside my bed in the dim light. I was drowning in family history and the weight of all those early griefs. She pulled me into the present, taught me that life was for living, not just analyzing. And then we had you, and she saved me all over again. I wish I could have saved her, I whispered. You did. Every day you existed was proof that love was worth the risk. That hope wasn't foolish. You saved her by being exactly who you were meant to be. He took my hand. And now you get to be whoever you want to be. No curse. No expiration date. Just life stretching out ahead of you like an open road. Evangeline was a constant presence, helping with medications, bringing me ice chips when swallowing hurt too much for water, reading to me from books when the headaches made screens impossible. She'd taken a leave of absence from her other job, moving into the facility's family quarters to stay close. You don't have to do this, I told her on the sixth day when I was finally coherent enough for real conversation. I know, but I want to. She sat on the edge of my bed, careful not to jostle any tubes or wires. You know, when I first got the call about this job, caring for an elderly man in a creepy old mansion, I almost said no. But something told me to say yes, some instinct I couldn't explain. Fate. Maybe. Or maybe just Louisiana intuition. She smiled. Either way, I'm glad I listened. Because this you, your father, this whole impossible situation, it feels like where I'm supposed to be. Even though I'm a genetic disaster. You're not a disaster, you're just complicated. And I like complicated. She took my hand, lacing our fingers together. My grand-mère used to say that the best things in life are never easy. Easy is boring. Easy doesn't teach you anything. Complicated, that's where the magic happens. I looked at our joined hands, at this woman who'd stayed when any sane person would have run. When I'm better, when we're back at Ravenwood, will you go to dinner with me? A real date. Only if you promise not to discuss genetic mutations or family curses. I promise. Then yes, I'd love to. On the eighth day, Mirabelle declared me stable enough to travel. Your markers are normal, she said, reviewing the latest test results. Neural activity within expected parameters. No signs of rejection or adverse reactions. You're officially cured, Dashiell. The word hung in the air like a miracle. Cured. I'd come here dying and now I was leaving whole. It didn't seem real, didn't seem possible. But the data didn't lie, and Mirabelle's cautious smile told me everything I needed to know. What happens now? I asked. You go home. Resume your life. Come back in 3 months for follow-up testing, then every 6 months after that for the first year. After that, annual checkups should be sufficient. She sat on the edge of my bed, looking tired but satisfied. Your mother would be so proud. We did it, Dashiell. We broke the curse. We, your mother, your father, you, me, all of us working together across time and death and impossible odds. She squeezed my shoulder. The thorn curse ends with you. Your children won't carry it. Your grandchildren will never know it existed. That's the real victory. The drive back to Ravenwood took 6 hours. We stopped frequently so I could rest, my stamina still limited, despite the success of the treatment. My father dozed in the front seat while Evangeline sat beside me in the back, watching the landscape slide past. What are you thinking about? She asked as we crossed back into Ashford County. Everything. Nothing. How different this drive is from the one I made a week ago." I looked at her. A week ago I was alone, angry, certain my father was a monster and my mother had died for nothing. Now, now, now I have a father again, and maybe something else too. She smiled, understanding. "One step at a time, Dashiell Thorne. You just had major brain surgery. Romance can wait until you can walk 20 feet without getting winded. But it can happen eventually." "Eventually," she confirmed. "When you're ready, when we're both ready." That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. Ravenwood looked different when we arrived. The same house, the same stone and glass and ancient oaks. But somehow less oppressive, less like a mausoleum and more like a home. Or maybe I was the one who'd changed. Mrs. Ashcroft had prepared the house for our return, opening windows to air out the rooms, filling vases with fresh flowers, stocking the kitchen with food. She met us at the door, this woman I barely remembered from childhood, and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Your mother would be dancing," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "She'd be so happy, Dashiell, so very happy." I hugged her back, this stranger who wasn't really a stranger, who'd loved my mother and kept her memory alive in small ways while my father and I were drowning in grief. That night we ate dinner in the dining room, all of us together. My father, Evangeline, Mrs. Ashcroft, and me. It was the first meal in that room since my mother's funeral, and it felt like resurrection. "I've been thinking," my father said over dessert apple pie, my mother's recipe, "about what to do with this house, with Ravenwood." "You're selling it?" I asked, surprised by the spike of loss that accompanied the thought. "No, donating it to Mirabelle's foundation. She wants to turn it into a research center and treatment facility for rare genetic disorders, a place where families like ours can find hope instead of despair." He looked around the dining room. "Your mother loved this house, but she loved helping people more. This feels like the right way to honor her memory. What about you? Where will you live?" "I've bought a small place in town near the library, somewhere I can walk to coffee shops and bookstores, somewhere that doesn't echo quite so much." He smiled and it transformed his face. "I'm 75 years old, Dashiell. I've spent my life in service to the past. I'd like to try living in the present before it's too late." "That sounds good, Dad." We sat in comfortable silence, four people who'd been brought together by tragedy and bound by hope. Outside, the November rain fell soft and steady, washing away the old and making space for the new. The Thorne Frost Institute held its grand opening 6 months later. The spring day was perfect, warm, sun-clear skies, the gardens around Ravenwood in full bloom. My father had spent the winter working with landscapers to restore my mother's vision. And now roses climbed the trellises, lavender bordered the paths, and the fountain ran clear. Scientists, patients, families who'd benefited from the protocol we'd pioneered all gathered in the manor's great hall. Mirabelle gave the keynote speech, standing at a podium in front of a portrait of my mother, young, smiling, radiant. Exactly as she should be remembered. Isadora Thorne believed that love was stronger than death. Mirabelle said, her voice carrying through the room. That the connections we forge in life echo beyond our years. This institute exists because she refused to accept that genetic destiny was immutable, because she fought for her son's future with every breath she had left, and because she understood that true legacy isn't measured in years, but in lives saved and hope given freely. I sat in the front row between my father and Evangeline, listening to a room full of people applaud my mother's memory. Evangeline's hand rested in mine, the small gold band on her finger catching the light we'd married last month in my mother's garden, with my father officiating and Mirabelle crying through the entire ceremony. The Institute had treated 12 patients so far, 8 successful cures, lives saved, families given futures. When the speeches ended and the crowd dispersed for the reception, I slipped away to the garden. The roses were in full bloom, exactly as they'd been in my hallucination during the treatment. I knelt beside them, running my fingers over soft petals, breathing in perfume that smelled like memory. "Thank you," I whispered to the flowers, to the sky, to whatever remained of my mother in this world. For everything. For the sacrifice. For the love. For giving me this life. The breeze picked up, rustling through the roses like laughter. I smiled, feeling at peace for the first time in longer than I could remember. Evangeline found me there an hour later. "There you are," she said, settling onto the bench beside me. "Your father's been looking for you. He wants to make a toast. Let him wait a few more minutes. I'm not ready to go inside yet." She nodded, understanding without explanation. We sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. "I've been thinking," I said eventually, "about Seattle, about my firm. I need to go back, settle things, decide what comes next." "Of course." Her voice was carefully neutral, but I heard the question beneath it. "I was hoping you might come with me. Not permanently necessarily, just to see the city. Meet my life there. Help me figure out what parts of it I want to keep and what I want to leave behind." She turned to face me, eyebrows raised. "Are you asking me on a trip or asking me something bigger?" "I'm asking if you want to be part of whatever comes next. For me, for us." I took her hand. "I know we did everything backwards, married first, figured out the rest later. But I don't regret it. I just want to make sure you don't regret it either." "Regret marrying you?" She laughed. "Dashiell, you're brilliant, brave, occasionally infuriating, and you make terrible coffee. But you're also kind, honest, and you're trying so hard to be better than you were." "How could I regret that? So you'll come to Seattle." "I'll come to Seattle and Boston and Louisiana so you can meet my family. And anywhere else life takes us." She leaned in and kissed me soft and sweet. "Because that's what marriage means, right? Going on adventures together. Building a life that's ours, not just yours or mine. Even when the adventure includes genetic curses and experimental brain surgery. Especially then." She pulled back, smiling. "Those make the best stories." My father found us as darkness fell. "There you are," he said, leaning on his cane but smiling. "I've been looking everywhere. Come inside, Mirabelle wants a picture. The three of us with her in front of your mother's portrait." "The three of us?" I asked. He gestured to Evangeline. "Your family now. Might as well make it official for the photographs." We followed him back inside through halls that no longer felt haunted into the great room where my mother's portrait watched over the gathering. Mirabelle joined us, still severe but with warmth in her eyes when she looked at me. The photographer positioned us, my father on one side, Evangeline on the other, Mirabelle behind us like a guardian angel, all of us standing beneath Isadora's smiling face. "Say thorns, the photographer instructed. But we didn't say that. We said Isadora, all of us together, honoring the woman who'd made this moment possible. The flash went off, capturing us, survivors, fighters, people who'd stared down genetic destiny and won. A new kind of family forged not by blood but by choice. Later, after the guests had left and the institute had closed for the night, I returned alone to the study where this had all begun. My father had left it largely unchanged, the genealogy charts still on the walls, the research notes still scattered across the desk. But now, at the bottom of the Thorn family tree, my name had been circled in green ink instead of red. And next to it, in my father's careful handwriting, "Survived, 2025. The curse ends here." I pulled out a pen and added one more line. "The curse ends. The love continues." Then I turned off the lights and left the past where it belonged, in the darkness, remembered but no longer ruling. 5 years later, I stand in the garden at Ravenwood on a perfect May morning. The roses are blooming, always blooming, now that we've learned my mother's secrets for keeping them year-round. The Institute has become world-renowned, featured in medical journals, referenced in genetics textbooks. We've treated 93 patients now, 78 successful cures, lives saved, families given futures. Evangeline is beside me, her hand in mine, a small gold band on her finger that matches the one on my own. She's pregnant with our first child, a daughter according to the ultrasound, a daughter who won't carry the curse, who'll grow up knowing her family history but not being bound by it. My father is 80 now, healthier than he has any right to be, splitting his time between the institute and teaching medical ethics at the university. He published his memoir 3 years ago, Breaking the Curse: A Father's Journey. The royalties all go to genetic research. He's working on a second book about Isadora, about the woman behind the science. Me, I'm 33 years old. Past the age when most thorns started their decline. Past the fear that woke me in cold sweats for the first year after treatment. Past the belief that I was living on borrowed time. I'm just living. Teaching architecture at the university. Designing buildings meant to last. Planning for futures that extend beyond next week, next month, next year. Loving my wife. Preparing for fatherhood. Making memories instead of just surviving. Are you ready? Evangeline asks, squeezing my hand. I look toward the house, toward the institute that bears my mother's name, toward the future we're building, toward the family we're creating. Yeah, I say, smiling. I'm ready. Because that's the real inheritance, not the curse, not the tragedy, not even the cure. It's the choice to keep living, keep loving, keep fighting, every single day. We walk back toward the house, past roses my mother planted, through gardens she designed, into a building dedicated to ensuring no other family has to face what ours did. The institute staff greets us warmly, researchers, doctors, patients in various stages of treatment. In the entrance hall, beneath my mother's portrait, stands a bronze plaque with words Mirabelle and my father chose together in memory of Isadora Thorne, who believed that love could break any curse and proved that hope is the strongest gene of all. I pause to read it, as I do every time I visit. Evangeline stops beside me, her hand on her swollen belly. She would have loved this, my wife says softly. The institute. The lives being saved, her granddaughter on the way. She would have loved you, I correct. The rest is just details. We continue upward to the 4th floor where my father waits in his office. The converted conservatory filled with plants and light and the warmth my mother always brought to spaces. He's reviewing patient files, making notes in his meticulous handwriting. Dashiell Evangeline. He looks up, smiling. Right on time. Mirabelle's joining us by video call in 5 minutes. We have news about the latest trial results. We settle into chairs around his desk. Through the windows I can see the town of Ashford spread below the place I ran from and eventually returned to, the place that's become home again. My phone buzzes. A text from a former client in Seattle asking if I'll consult on a new project. I silence it. That life feels distant now, important once, but no longer defining. Mirabelle appears on the computer screen, calling from Boston. Good afternoon. I hope you're all sitting down. The results from Trial 7 are remarkable. Complete remission in all 6 subjects. No adverse effects. We're ready to publish. My father's hand finds mine across the desk. His grip is still strong, still steady, still the grip of a man who refused to give up, who fought against impossible odds, who saved his son's life through sheer stubborn determination. Your mother would be so proud, he whispers. She'd be proud of all of us, I reply. After the meeting, after the plans are made and the papers signed, I find myself alone in the study. The same study where I discovered the truth about my family, about my curse, about the genetic destiny I was supposed to fulfill. I run my fingers along the genealogy chart, tracing the names of Thornes who died too young. Cornelius, Ambrose, Bartholomew, Montgomery, Archibald, Thaddeus. All brilliant, all cursed, all gone. And then my name, Dashiell Thorne, with that green circle instead of red, with survived written in my father's hand. I pull out a pen and add to the family tree Isadora Marie Thorne, born 2025, expected arrival June. My daughter, the first Thorne in 200 years who'll grow up without the shadow of early death hanging over her. Who'll choose her own future free from the weight of genetic destiny. That's worth everything. Every moment of fear, every hour of pain, every sacrifice my mother made and my father continued. The curse ends with me. but the love, the fierce, stubborn, impossible love that carried our family through 2 centuries of tragedy that continues forever.